Scientient. I'm Keith Sutherland. Today my guest is Marg O'Rourke, candidate for Eppalock Ward. Welcome.
Hello Keith, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
It's good.
Now, someone mentioned to me yesterday that a lot of the candidates were a bit disappointed that they didn't have business background. Now, I go through what you've been involved in. Plenty of business acumen. We've been involved with Telstra for many years. Governance with Bendigo Health, TAFE, GM Water, Aspire and many other organisations. Plus you're involved in the independent review. Is that part of the reason that you think you've got this experience and you bring it to the table?
Keith, it is part of the reason. I grew up, and I think I mentioned this to Dennis earlier when I was interviewed, I grew up in an environment in Bendigo where business people, business leaders were actually the councillors. And I think we've lost a bit of that in terms of having some business acumen around the table, and particularly big business. As you say, the city's business now is 200 million, and the various businesses that I've been involved in, you know, Bendigo Health, largest employer in Bendigo, and a number of others at that big end of town. But I've also got the small business experience. So once leaving Telstra, running your own small business, and Ray's got his cleaning business. So we've sort of got both sides covered in that regard, I think, in my experience. And the governance piece is a really important part of a councillor's role as well, and being on boards certainly teaches you that.
I've been doing some interviews, not just with IPTv, on another forum as well, and it's coming through loud and clear that the comments that be coming back to me that ratepayers and residents are not being listened to and they feel they don't have a voice. Transparency, accountability and more consultation has been the thing. Is that something that you're hearing from, you've been on the campaign trail for about 3 months, and that's been coming through loud and clear from lots of the candidates. But is that something you're hearing as you get around, talk to people, residents and ratepayers?
Yeah, it definitely is. People do feel that they've been a bit ignored. Not totally, but there certainly has been that, and whether that's the element that happens when you're actually out doing listening posts, people take that advantage to come and talk to you. I'm amazed at how many queries I've taken. I've visited people's properties with, you know, they're talking about overhanging trees and footpaths and so on. And I've had comments back, you're the first person that's ever done that, yet I've complained often. So I think there is a little bit of that. I do feel that there's the winds of change. Certainly the most overwhelming comment that I've had is that we need quite a change of councillors. People are certainly seeing that they feel there needs to be some new blood that's been brought in. The roads rates rubbish of what traditional councils do. There is that sense that that's been ignored a little bit as well.
At the end of the day, we are a business in Bendigo that's sort of developing very quickly, and we do need people to sort of follow it through. And that's the other thing I'm hearing around town, is that people do want change. Hopefully not just for the sake of change, but they want it.
Yeah, look, I agree, and it's having that diverse range of people around the table, but it's also being able to prioritise things. And we can't ignore, we do need some of those big ticket items. You know, as Bendigo continues to grow, we need that infrastructure. And when governments, whether it's federal or state, come forward with grants, you know, we need to be able to be ready for that. It's almost like having the projects in the bottom drawer to be able to say, well, what are the things that we can actually partner with? So sometimes those big ticket items come at a more reduced cost for Bendigo because we've got other parties involved as well.
And that's a very good point you make about bottom items in the bottom drawer, because this is something that Dennis and I on Head to Head talk about, because we've got a state election in a couple of years. We need to start preparing for that now. What are the projects that we want, some state government money? We might have a federal election any time in the next couple of years, depending on what happens. So we do need these projects, and if we're not prepared for them, what level of rates we need to be able to fund some of these projects. But we do need to have the top half dozen and prioritise for the top three. So I think that's a very good point that you make.
Yeah, you've always got to be prepared, you know, the opportunity there. And I think Bendigo has been fortunate that in the last few elections, we've actually got a big slice of the pie. In fact, probably more than our other regional partners, you know, in terms of Geelong and Ballarat and Shepparton also. We've been smart enough, I think, to be able to have some of those on the ready. Unfortunately, it does come with criticism at times, but people, I think, need to understand that whole picture And you said it earlier when you mentioned that I put my hand up. I've also sat back at times and sort of shaken my head and said, what's going on here? And I put my hand up for the independent review. And that was a fantastic experience of getting to understand the workings of the council better. I've worked with councils all across Australia, whether it be as a customer, whether it's by putting in planning applications for mobile towers. So I've seen a wide range of how councils operate. The independent review was a really good opportunity for me to get to see council in a different phase. The passion I had through doing that review at the time, I thought, if I feel like this in 2 years' time when the council elections come around, and all of the ducks line up in terms of where I'm at with my family, with my business and so on, I'll put my hand up, and that's why I did.
Okay. Now, we'll come down to the crux of it, because to get elected, you seem to need preferences these days. And I know we've got Team Whipstick out there. We've got other groupings of 3 supporting their votes. I noticed that you and Yvonne Wrigglesworth are saying vote for either 1 or 2 and you put your third placing somewhere. Is that a great way to go? Because I agree with the Team Whipstick. If you've got 3 like-minded people, you can work together. That seems to be the way to go. But if you don't get those preference flows, you don't get elected. So is that the logic behind yourself and Yvonne preferencing each other 1 and 2, or suggesting that's the way it worked?
For starters, Keith, I was unsure who I would even preference, and with the changes with the VEC not allowing the preference how to vote cards to go into the pack has changed everything, obviously. I did quite a bit of research on what was happening in other local government areas. Yvonne and I have known each other for some time. Obviously, she's an executive at Bendigo Health. I've known her for about 8 years, and she's a very capable person. For me, I felt if I wasn't standing, I would more than likely vote for Yvonne. So in my view, I didn't know the other candidates very well. And so for me, until you actually understand exactly what candidates stand for and what their values are, I would have found it really hard to preference any of those people. The other thing is, I think you've got to be careful that you don't have all like-minded people on your ticket, because all of a sudden you've got the same sort of people then sitting around the table. And history's shown that how to vote cards actually don't get followed very well. It's a low percentage of people that actually do the whole how to vote card. They usually might pick 1 or 2 that they like, but they change their order. So for Yvonne and I, when we had the discussion, we felt it was important that people actually still have their choice. It's a democracy, and it's not about dictating what you do 1 to 10. And a lot of people have done their whole 1 to 10. For us, it was around 3 to 10. Make your decision on that. Okay.
Also interesting, some of the surveys and responses that have been out there. And we had the tourism, Bendigo sustainability. You came at number 1.
I did.
So that's very good.
Yeah.
On the other end of it, then there was people that were suggesting to stop the mosque. You came at number 9 on the bottom, Yvonne number 10. So it's interesting how it's reversed. There was also another one in the Bendigo Weekly talking about these are the strong independent people, suggesting Colin Carrington, George Flack and Jeff Stevens people. So interesting how some of those surveys are coming through. Were you happy to be, particularly the one I see was the important one, was tourism and the Bendigo sustainability coming at number 1. You must have been pretty happy with that result.
Well, I was happy, but it was common sense to me. So I didn't do the survey in the sense or thinking that they were going to be ranked. I mean, for me, the questions were the questions, and it was a yes-no answer. And more than 50%, if I agreed with it, I said yes. There were comments that I put in there that I firmly believe that we need to do more in that space, and I think the city's got a good plan, and it's a 20-year plan. So yeah, I was happy with where I came out, but I certainly wasn't doing it with the intention of that. In terms of tourism, I think tourism's really important in terms of the money that comes into Bendigo that tourism brings here. You look at it as a return on investment. I know other candidates are saying, well, they don't think that money should be spent, but it is a return on the investment. And when you look at what actually flows into Bendigo through tourism, it's a really important part of our business here. And I just think we have to have those diverse views, as I said, around the table. I'm independent. I'm actually not aligned to anyone. And even though Yvonne and I have said that we preference each other, we're very separate and we've got very separate campaigns. Part of our advertising has been that we actually have our own branding still. We're not teaming up like some of the others in terms of their their joint advertising and so on. In that respect, we're very individual.
Okay. What do you see as the major issues affecting Bendigo over the next 4 years? Because it's a 4-year term. You've looked at it, you've been on the independent review, you know a lot of the background to what's happening in Bendigo, but what do you see the major issues going forward over the next 4 years?
Look, I think the challenge will be with rate capping, Keith, in terms of being able to, the financials around how we actually grow as a city in terms of our infrastructure. You know, we know that it's going to keep increasing. People are putting numbers around that mid-century Bendigo will be 200,000. So how do we actually grow towards that? What are we going to do as a city? So I think the planning is really important. The other thing is, as the first council comes in November, the council plan's already set in terms of the budget. So we're going to be operating in the 16-17 budget with it already laid out. Obviously, the new council will set the council plan for the next 4 years. So I think that will be really critical in terms of how that's actually going to function and look. And I just think that prioritising, as we said, getting the balance between core business for council, but also then how do we look at our growth? And we've got to always keep growth in mind.
Okay. The opposite to that is there's a lot of criticism of the current council, dysfunction, sort of people not getting on. I know the mosque has probably been the major issue that's caused dissension in the council. What other areas do you see as being a bit of a problem with this current council that you think that the next council should be doing better? There hasn't been harmony amongst councillors, but having said that, on the opposite end, there's been a lot of things come to fruition. There's a lot of the strategies, the planning and all sorts of things, the residential strategy, the transportation, a lot of things have come together over this period of time and the completion of many major projects. But what do you see the major problem with the current council?
Look, it seems as if there's been this perception, whether it's real or not, that people think that the executive have been running the council.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, I certainly don't see it as that. Because I look at the council model as being as a board, and the council laws set the strategy, and the council executive, or whatever executive it is that runs a board, they actually do the day-to-day work. And I've spoken about this before. The council law's role is to not be into the operational. And they can certainly look and they can guide and so on, and they can ask questions. But I think there is that view that when you have a governance model that overlays it, unless councillors are full-time people that are actually paid to do that work right to the grassroots, that's the difference. They're in an overarching strategy role, and then they direct the CEO to do the work, and obviously the CEO then directs his team. Now, when that information comes back up to the council, if the councillors are not happy with what they get, well, they just go and ask more questions, and they don't sign off things if they don't feel that it's correct or they need more information. That's how a good board will operate. But there is that view, I think, that the executive team have driven a lot of the things. Unless you're in the council chamber and around that table, I suppose you won't get to understand that until potentially you're elected to see how that operates. But on the boards that I've been on, it's a very similar model. And, it's making sure that the direction is really strong for what you want as your strategy, your plan.
You mentioned about you almost need to be a full-time councillor, and we're talking 30 to 40 hours a week, and you get paid something like $26,000. Not a lot of money for being able to put a lot of governance into that, a lot of strategies, a lot of reading, and a lot of time and energy goes into it. So at the end of the day, obviously the director and the board, not so much the board, the directors are going to make a lot of these decisions, because as councillors, you do get bogged down in a lot of issues. You will get the phone calls about the water's not running properly, this has gone wrong, roads, footpaths and so on. So it's a pretty fine balancing act to try and have the directive in one area, having the board and having the governance of the management team. So pretty tough gig.
Yeah, it is, but it's not that difficult when you actually know what your role is, and it's making sure that you actually don't get into the operational side. of the activities, and that's that fine balance. And when you say that the executive make decisions, well, they do put business cases up, like in any board environment. They do put papers up to a board to suggest a way forward. But again, you have that discussion and debate around the table, but the council are the ones that sign it off. So the council are the ones at the end of the day vote for things, and if they're not happy, they can put their hand up and say, but as a collective, if it does get passed, well, then you move on.
Okay, finally, if you get elected, you're one of 9. It's very difficult unless you've got 4 other people on your side to get some things through. Is there some major issue that you would like to see implemented in your first 4 years on council if you are elected? Is there something that you really want to see come to fruition by the end of that 4-year period that you're really passionate about?
There's a few actually, Keith.
Okay, give me a few.
4 years is a long time.
It sure is.
Look, I'm very strong in the smart city, connected communities that, I've worked in that space. I think we can do more around that, which I actually think ultimately will assist in our sustainability environment strategy around how we can actually connect people better, and some of the activities that will happen because of that in terms of how people would interact with council, but interact in the livability of the city. So I'm really keen to see the city pursue what we would call a smart city strategy. And I don't like to call it smart city because people go, what does that mean? But it's about our community being more connected, really. The other one I'd really like to see is retail, and I have spoken about this in the last week or so. Retail is one of our largest employment sectors in the city of Greater Bendigo, and we don't have a retail strategy for our CBD, in my view. When I get in council, maybe I'll be showing something, but I haven't been able to find anything. And I think we need a retail strategy about what do we want our CBD to look like.
And a lot more support. They really need it.
Yeah, they do. They absolutely do need a lot more support. And I think we need to try and differentiate ourselves from our other regional cities. We've got all the arts piece happening really well. People are coming here. If they can have a retail experience that's a bit different with some bigger brand names, whatever they might be, and some people have said to me, that won't happen. But you know what? You've got to have a conversation and you've got to have a dream. And when I look at Bendigo Health, 8 or 9 years ago when I sat at that table, when all we had was a dream for a new hospital, and now we're going to have a world-class hospital here. It all starts with thinking big, and I think we need to do that for retail, because I think that our retailers need that support as well. So that's the other one that I would really like to see some more work happening in that space as well.
And the NBN, you're very big on that
which
as
is part of the connected communities. Yeah. And I just think we also need to be a bit more customer responsive. So my experience out and about has been simply because I've been going to people who have asked me to come and have a look at something at their property or whatever. I'm not saying that the council are not customer focused, but when you are one entity, a monopoly, which, I can talk about that in my telecom and Telstra days, your sense of a customer is a bit different, and I feel that the city maybe haven't got that strong sense of who their customers are and what they need to do for them. So I'm pretty keen to get that customer focus happening even more.
Well done. Thank you, Marg, for appearing on the Pointy End today. I wish you well with the rest of your campaign. Good luck with the forthcoming election, because people only have 9 more days to cast their ballots.
That's right.
So good luck, and thank you for appearing on the program this morning.
Thanks, Keith.